this is something that's something that's been I've been working on for a while, in the sense of I've always been interested in economics, and that's what I went to school for. And the way I view things these days is like we can be, we can be very modern in the sense of who we believe we are. However, at the same time, there's some simplicity to us that has pretty much, gone away. And I wanted to jump into it from this perspective that, we look at this world, and we see Wall Street, and we see all these different things that's going on, and we see stimulus, and we see all these different things. So like, people are often wondering right now in this particular time, what are they going to do in an economy like this? Or pretty much, what is the economy itself coming to? So, I just maybe want to start off with the definition of economics. And it's quite funny because most of our economics today doesn't really have anything as much to do with, the art of managing a household. Now, people would say, oh, okay, well, I still go to work, and I come home, and I take the money that I get from work, and then I support my home, and that's how I manage the resources. But you see, the thing that people are not understanding is that the major resource in any given home is not the money. It's the people. And then the second major resources are the things that the people depend on within themselves. So that's where the management came from. So economy, in 1821, as you can see with this definition here, it started to change. It started to be pretty much a bigger picture kind of thing, like in the sense of, getting something that everybody needs at a cheaper rate. But as you can see with economy, and even the original Greek etymology of the word, it comes from household management. And so much has changed in the way we manage our households just in the last, probably in thousands of years. But when we consider living in America and how we do things, like, it's changed drastically just in the last 100 years. And 100 years before that, it changed drastically as well too. Because once upon a time, it was pretty common what you got out of living. It was pretty common how what you got, what lifestyle looks like. It's changed drastically these days, but the core of it is still the same, no matter how much we try to dress it up with money, no matter how much we try to dress it up with clothes, no matter how much we try to dress it up with the things that we feel that substantiates us. And that's really the sad part, that economics, something that's family orientated, is not really primarily family orientated anymore, because people are not working together to create economics. Economics depends on the family being together right there. Before, you can just assume she's got wood in her hand, the child's got some water there, and he's got a bird in his hand, of course, a chicken. It's safe to assume that they all live together and work together. And it's also safe to assume there's probably more of them as well, working together, creating for themselves. Now, ironically, a lot of people don't understand is that this is where, America went uh, after slavery, and a little bit before slavery, started, because, the common man that was there and living among, he had to live and fend for himself. He didn't really have to depend on government like we depend on government these days. Government has gotten bigger, so they interfered in our lives, and they're part of the reason why we got the picture on the right. She's rushing off to work. The kids are going to be get dropped off somewhere. In this picture to the left, grandma is there, or somebody else is there to watch the kids. They don't have to be watched or overseen by an outside person or a stranger. He's going to a job. He's not going to come back until who knows when. 10, 12 hours of the day, they don't get to spend any time with their family. How can you develop any kind of economics in anything that's positive economics in a situation like this. Nonetheless, this is what we've been living in, and we've been making do with it. We've been, taking care of what it is, but like it comes with a whole lot. And like I just want to jump straight into the nitty gritty of why this has been so important lately, and why it's even anything to be considered, because the whole lifestyle setup that we have, it's headed like literally nowhere, especially in a world like today where so much money is being printed. They're saying here 21% of all US dollars were printed in 2020. 21% of the circulation of money that's out there right now. And I've seen estimates saying that it is as much as 40%. But if you look at 2020 and you see how far it goes up right there compared to the other years, come on, man. All we're doing is printing money, essentially. Printing money. Like, what happens to the value of something if there's too much of it? I don't care in what field or whatever you're in. If there's too much of something, the value of it is not going to stay high, and it's not going to stay high consistently. So a lot of people, like they're blindsided by really what's going on right now. There's a lot of money flowing in the economy since last year because of all this money that's being printed up. We're talking about an injection of over $9 trillion in the market since September 2019. So it started a few months before 2020. So, like when you look at what we have here, we're talking about close to over 3-4 trillion specifically, plus all the other spending, plus the deficit that's there. If America was a business, it'll be negative and it would go bankrupt. And it is negative, and it is essentially going bankrupt. However, many of us, because the money is blindsiding us, the money is keeping us from having to live check to check, which is what most of us would have to do if there wasn't a surplus of these dollars coming to us to quote unquote stimulate the economy. And stimulate the economy means simple stuff like buying Chipotle or going to Walmart and picking up some groceries or whatever the case is. That's stimulating the economy to them. Whereas in reality, these are basic needs and necessities, especially when anything that you're going to go pick up at Walmart, maybe not to Chipotle, you could cook if you buy something in Walmart, assumingly. But the bottom line is that this money is artificially floating the economy, putting money in the pockets of businesses. However, it's not sustainable. And a lot of people really feel that this is what's going to happen. I mean, a $1.9 trillion stimulus has already been okayed by Joe Biden. So, more money is coming and more money will continuously come. But I don't think that most people understand the dangers of the constant printing of money or the over circulation of money, because this in particular, specifically, I mean literally specifically, how most empires go kaput. This is how they die, because the way that people want, like these powers, right, these so-called powers that be, they've been around in some shape or form for hundreds, if not thousands of years. This is actually thousands of years, or what we call thousands of years. And they've been doing practically the same shit in every dispensation. And every time you got these people, these same type of people who are attempting to do certain things, and by not really serving the people, which is why you have to look at civilization itself as like a bad child of real humanity or of indigenous societies. And because what we see in through the history of time is like this concept or idea that we're all living together, we're all working together, we're all doing it. Not really. We all didn't live, work, and mesh together as how society portrays us to currently do. So in many cases, whether it's the fall of Rome or any other recent times or times after, like these economies were over flooded by people who were trying to control the masses, and eventually they fall because they're trying to do something new. So all great empires fall, and one of the things that you can always tell when an empire is falling is that their currency is literally getting inflated. The cost of living is constantly going up. The morality within the country or the place itself, that is the biggest indicator. The money comes later. Things start going bad economically later, but it starts going bad initially based on how the people treat themselves. And if the people who are in charge are encouraging people essentially to treat each other terribly or to be divided, then it's only so long that a house of cards can stand. I feel like, with our generation of people not really seeing these things before, we wouldn't even understand when a collapse is right underneath our nose. And I'm not saying that we need to be afraid, but in some ways you really need to be thankful that if this could be the end, then damn it should be, because the shit has not been good. It's not been productive. It's not been beneficial to society, to the earth, to the planet. The shit needs to end, and it's time for it to go. And like, people wonder why it happened like this. And I just take it back to that first image. Men stop being creators and producers. And when I say men, that includes women as well too. But the bottom line is that, how do you get to a system that pretty much goes up and goes down? Is there anybody stopping it from going down? And that's what constitutions and laws and various other metrics or civil liberties were created for, to check and balance powers. But in the last 100 years, what has been going on is a continuous gradual system where, for the most part, men are being caged. We're being pulled, we're being herded like cattle into industries. For what? For steel magnates and oil rich people who don't do anything much for you. Once the government, once they can figure out how to get away with not treating you right and not paying you right, that's exactly what they do. And so, like, when we start allowing this, now what is happening is they lured men off the land. And I've spoken about this several times before, especially you looking in the history of any kind of civilization, because you move out from where you are to where it's popping, essentially, which would be the city where the concentrations of people are. But people don't really understand what comes with that. What comes with that is that you don't really become a producer for yourself in these environments. Your talent is essentially being limited, so that way you don't produce for yourself, but your time is being allocated to produce for somebody else, because this is the system that's been created and we're just ushered into it. So now, if we're not creating and we're not producing, then what the hell are we doing? We're taking handouts. We're taking handouts. And then when you start taking handouts, they start valuing the money more than they value you, even though the money itself has no value. It's been since 1971 since they decided to untag the dollar from the gold standard. So it really is valueless. And I hear a lot of people talk about that and say that it's a consequence of what's going on right now. And I don't believe so. I think the consequences has more to do with the leadership, and the morality of the leadership is what you see here. Like capitalism, people can talk bad about it and be whatever it is that they want to be when it comes to what they have to say about capitalism. But there are ways for people to be profitable. There are ways for it to be sustainable. There are ways where you could literally have the exchange of goods and commodities equally without them inflating and going higher. Like, in reality, you have to think, does the cost of harvesting a seed increase every year to justify why food prices are going to also increase every year? Not really. But the 80% of it, which is convenience, is what most of us are paying. We're paying 80% on the dollar for the convenience factor, not for the actual product itself. So now, once the product is not so viable, money becomes the reason you move, then things don't work in your favor anymore. And then at the end of the day, they're going to put the money over you. And this is like the system that we've basically gone into. It's not fostering or producing or cultivating a generation or generations of people who can make it in the world. The government is not even, the feds or whoever you want to call, or who's in charge. What needs to be understood is that it's not a fair market. It's not a fair market. So no matter how much trinkets they give you or how much welfare or whatever you get thrown at without an opportunity to create. You're just you're just human capital, as they like to call it. You're just human capital. And the truth is, if we lived in a country that actually treated us like the country treated the commodities, like the corn and the stocks and the this and the that, and if we had governments and we had structures and systems that actually took care of people instead of looking at the bottom line, then it'll be a different situation, because your nation, your government, your republic, or what have you, your community, because it starts really down on the basic level. People really have to do this for themselves. People really have to be able to go in there and within their own family units. That's why it's called economics. Take care of each other, literally and figuratively. And so, like, you can't expect a government or a country or anyone to do something for you that in essence you're not doing for yourself. But on a macro perspective, we just got to be real. And the reality is, this government, this everything that's going on, they're not trying to bring out the best in you. However, you got Plato saying right here, each man is capable of doing one thing well. If he attempts several, he will fail to achieve distinction in any. So they know this. These things have been around for a very long time, especially when it comes to your productive output. When it comes to your ability to actually, you know, put your hand to something and create something with your own will, with your own skill, with your own talents. When you get the opportunity to do that, you can become great at whatever you put your hands at. But if you never get developed, as a country, as a nation, as a people, and let's just be real, we're not being developed. And that's what economics really is. Economics includes all these things that people are not really considering, because socioeconomics is basically how you get grouped into your income bracket or your whatever gap that they're putting you into, and then how you view yourself based on what's being told to you. So if you come from a certain area or a community, you're going to just automatically assume you come from the poorer area. If they say that's the poorer area town, you're not going to be able to develop very well if your mind is already programmed against you. If you're already being told, that your odds of success are falling apart. And then now you look at this whole investment, kind of modern investment that's been going on for the last 100 years. I'm not saying these things are terrible. I'm not saying that these things haven't gained people wealth. I'm not saying that they haven't worked to a certain degree to basically to serve some purpose. But you really got to think, what is the purpose of all of this right now? Where does it come from? Because most of our investments, if you're smart, you got some stocks and you got some equities and you got some bonds and you got some fixed income equities, and there's levels, and futures and other financial derivatives. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But for the most part, what people know is cash. And so it just shows you, what you're most familiar with and what you're most used to considering an asset, or owning as an asset. For most people, is cash equivalents. And then, if you find a way to walk up or crawl up the totem pole and you make it to a decent job, which puts you back in that same position of being subservient to an employer, but you get a little money market account, a 401k or something like that. Then you get some stocks and some stocks from that. You start making a little bit of money through those means. Most likely that's how you do it. And then, of course, the last and probably the most important asset that most people understand is real estate and other tangible assets. But real estate within the sense that any poor person who poor as in doesn't have access to land and resources, and if you can't afford a piece of land to live on or what have you, then you are in a bracket. You're in what they call a bracket that is dependent on your access to it. So these things are called asset classes, and these things have been changing and switching around a lot. And the worst part about it is most of it is controlled by Wall Street. So like it's like the same entities that have set us up for a fall already. Now we consider ourselves, okay, well, I got some real estate here. Well, guess what? It doesn't take much for them to manipulate the real estate market. Cash can be manipulated based on interest rates. Everything can be manipulated. But this, nonetheless, is where most investments fall. And what most investors or even day traders will tell you, they don't care what's going on. They're just trying to bet the other way or hedge on it or something like that. They're just trying to make money off of it. And these are the type of people that do not care whether the economy or the country is falling apart. And because hey, I'm just trying to secure my chips for myself, for my family. And guess what? Any of these chips on this list right here that you get are, are are financial instruments that can easily be manipulated, plain and simple. You know what I'm saying? So like most of us have pretty much blindly accepted the role in financial allocation based on the system, and pretty much like it's the bankers. Like we've been talking badly about these guys for the last 12 or 13 years based on what they did in the collapse recently. And the same thing is happening again. Like I said, you may have a good idea about how your stocks and things are doing, because some people's stocks, they took a little dip in March, but bounce right back. But in reality, when you see where the country is going, whether you want to ignore it or play whatever game you want to play with it, you're going to have to really consider, is there anything like, am I even in the asset conversation? Do I own anything that's really valuable? Because if the stock market crashes, bonds, listen, there's so much happening with debt all across the board that it's 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 fair to say that everything could possibly crash within the next year or two. And we didn't see a full crash last year, but look at how the country was overall affected. So it's like, if people don't really, if we're too doped out on Facebook and Instagram and social media to even realize these things are happening, um, like right underneath our nose. Yeah, some people are getting rich, but this, you see, what a lot of people don't understand is like asset allocation and asset classes, they go for a while. Those same houses in 2002 that were being sold for 75,000 or 150,000 were being sold in 2012 for 45, really less. So what happened? Who determined that? And that's really what, we all should be aware of when it comes to how we are literally, you know, looking at what is valuable to us. And if we're going to think to ourselves, okay, well, if this and that happens, and it ain't really no if, it's pretty certain at this point right now. There's so many red flags that have been flashing for so long that, if you don't know, if you're not aware, it doesn't mean that it won't happen just because you don't want it to happen. But real estate is also something that I can never like go against. But like I said, they don't tell you about the millions of real estate deals that go badly, and not because you bought it and it was worth less thereafter, but because you bought it and the economy changed. And yes, maybe it was worth less, but it depends on how much less. Because in 2012, my family had a property that was purchased for about 480 something thousand, right? And by 2012, the value on it was like 180 grand. And we still had to pay this note. And this is when they did all these financial maneuvering, and we were actually victims of some financial maneuvering that they did that caused us to lose that property. But what I'm saying is, like, people don't look at these things because of these booms and these busts, because of these bubbles that are existing right now. So let's say interest rates are low. Interest rates are really, really low right now. So that means, it's they'll damn near give you money to go buy a house if you've got some collateral or something like that. It's not really that hard. However, what's the use of having low interest on something you overpaid for? What's the you like how much equity are you going to have in the home if the economy changes? And of course, the cons of real estate is that you got to have money to do it. It is labor intensive. Do you understand what I'm saying? Appreciation generally does hedge inflation, but when you put when this much money is being pumped into the market, I don't I don't see how that is even realistic right now. But nonetheless, on my timeline, and recently I've seen a lot of people so proud to overpay for these houses. More power to them. But in an economy, in a bad economy, in a potential crash economy, you live in with what, 5,000 square feet. The house is 2,500. The yard is another 25, or you have no space. You're cooped up in the city. You have to wait for things to be delivered for you. Like that FEMA stuff that people keep talking about for these years. That's how it's going to be when you're partitioned in your little small place that you overpaid for, that you can't afford anymore, that you're practically stuck at now. Like the world is changing, and it's not a scare tactic. It's really about awareness. And what I like to say is that hard tangible assets matter. And as a matter of fact, I get that from a lot of the guys that I follow on YouTube that talk about this stuff. Like, people have their various levels of intangible assets that are worth a lot. Licenses are worth a lot. Brand recognition is worth a lot. Internet domains, having so many different things that are intangible that you can't hold in your hand, that are worth a lot. But in a crash economy now, in an economy where things are not, where jobs are not in surplus, like, tangible assets become more valuable. And it all depends on how bad things get. Now, nobody wants to think, oh my gosh, Great Depression time will come back again. But like, listen, it's been damn near 100 years since then. And the real truth is, all we've been doing is printing money since then. The economy hasn't been good. The country hasn't been great. Like we've had some peaks and valleys, but it's just been going downhill. Asset classes have changed. Certain things, let's say, for example, you got some beach houses in Miami that are worth a lot, but at any given moment, a hurricane blows it over, or water recedes or something. Like, how valuable is it? So like certain tangible hard assets, can be, subject to the value of whatever changes are made. Now, things will be valued at different rates, because we don't live in this life. We don't live in a world where we look at the things that we own and say, I think I'm going to trade this in for something else. We don't do that very often anymore, because most of the tangible hard assets that we own are worthless. They're things, they're computers, they're iPhones, they're kitchen appliances. I'm not saying they're not worth anything, but a lot of them, the mass majority of them, are worth nothing. And in a bad economy, like, how do you liquidate that? I'm quite sure you could trade it, because at the end of the day, like, to be economically empowered is to have, tradable assets. So now, lately, you've probably been hearing about all the drive for gold and silver. Gold and silver has been experiencing a lot of investment lately. But at the same time, you know, do you own it? Do you have it in your hand? And you have to think to yourself, how much can you realistically get? Can you get enough to really impact your life? Can you get enough to, to the point where, let's say, you spent your whole whatever life savings to a certain degree? Because I really do believe that it's equivalent to some form of life savings. We're not talking about $500 or $1,500 or $2,000 or something like that, really being able to bring you back any wealth in any short-term period of time. It's not going to happen that fast. So in a nutshell, if you don't have enough of something invested, like, how much is that value that you have going to really change your life in a bad economy? Like, in a changed economy where, the skills that were practical for you are not as available anymore. And the thing that I like to say is, like, silver and gold, we know has been manipulated. We know is being manipulated. Just like Robinhood and these stocks that we were looking at were manipulated before too. So, like, this is what we're dealing with in a nutshell. So, like, how much of it, let's say, look at the tangible assets on that side, how much of it is really going to be worth something? Because let's say cash, okay, cash could be worth significantly less than it was before, like, easily. You see what's happening with digital currencies right now. So like there's a chance that cash cannot be accepted somewhere. Okay. Land, of course, I don't land to me is probably the most valuable asset that you can have and own. But you know, like there's this old saying that if you can't hold it, you don't own it. So even though we do literally quote unquote own the land according to titles, like land is based on labor and being able to convert something out of it. So it's like, you know, I've been in the urban farming section, so, business for a while, and I've seen people take an acre, and make a viable product that can feed themselves, and it's amazing because our minds say, okay, we need this and we need that. So land is only as good as the labor input that you're going to put in there and the ingenuity that you put in there. But from that, so many different opportunities exist, of course, you know, but only thing that's going to uh, quell the value of land will be climate change, right? So let's say if you live in Florida and you got some nice property and things change, and the water comes up a little bit, and now that's a swamp. You know, the value of it changes, the use of it changes as well too. It doesn't mean that it loses its value. And then look at equipment. You know, things are changing so fast, especially with 5G technology. Some of the equipment that was, you know, very well used and standard could change easily and be literally out of use. So you know, your tangible assets, it matters. Inventory. If you have a business, let's say you have a business and it was selling really good, things change, you're stuck with that inventory, nobody's buying it. It has to be something valuable that people are going to buy. Machinery, I can see machinery surviving, but then machinery will require other things for you to protect the machinery, upkeep the machinery, maintain the machinery. Now, if you got the knowledge and the skills, which is why so many machinery based industries were only operated by certain people who had the skills and the techniques to fix them, or you know, when they broke, through any economy. Furniture, you know, of course, those will be barter things, you know, and so forth. Stocks, bonds, so forth, so on. Tangible assets are not going to always be the same kind of value always. But what you do have is that you own them and they're in your hand. Now, everybody's been talking about cryptocurrency lately, and you know, I've been playing with cryptocurrency for the last 3 years or so, without even having the ultimate concept of why it's important. Just looking at it 3 years ago as an investment alone wasn't really the way to look at cryptocurrency. Now, cryptocurrency within itself, and quite frankly, I'm just telling you what I hear. I don't know none of this shit. And most of the truth is, like, it's so easy to lie to people. It's so easy to be deceived by what is being said out there that, you know, I ultimately don't recommend just blindly trusting in anything. But from what it seems to me, from my research, it can't be manipulated. But just recently, you know, in the crypto market, like, people were taking major losses because there was some form of manipulation based on dumping. It wasn't price manipulation, but you know, if you sell a whole bunch of something, the price is going to go down, and that was happening. So we see the different financial instruments that are involved, but nonetheless, I think it's a good market to be in. It's a good market to be in. It's just highly volatile. So a lot of people who, let's say you got to last 5 grand and you want that $5,000 to last you, and let's say you can live without the $5,000, but you want to put it somewhere where it can earn you. So now there's a lot of worry that you would have if it were merely just Bitcoin that you were putting it into now, with the volatility that's there. And what I mean by that is that if you were invested in this 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, it'll be a different thing, because then you'll have equity. You'll have equity from being a holder in it, just like you would have equity from holding onto something for a long time, whether that's land or a collectible or anything, the same thing. So if you're going to put a lot into it right now, it is very volatile. You know, some news comes out and says something, and it plunges, and you lose a lot because you're invested in a high rate. So like, the volatility of it will not soothe some people, but the purpose of it, the mindset that goes into it, is F the system. It's that we don't want to be ran by banks anymore. And even if it's not fully figured out, let the people figure it out. Let us figure out how we're going to compensate each other for the goods and the values and the services that we exchange amongst each other. And to say that we don't want government involved in that, and to say that we don't want a federal reserve determine the value of that, is a big kind of middle finger to these establishments, and perhaps one of the biggest things or the best things that you can do. But how informed are people? You know, how informed? Like how like most of us don't really understand why it's important to do that. and and so, the other thing is that people are talking about the stock market a lot. I guess I'm not as much these days because I definitely am expecting some form of a stock market crash to to pair with last year and just kind of like complete the process. So, understanding different financial instruments such as futures and commodities, and understanding the different ways of staying of putting your money or floating your money through a system that perhaps is going to be there. Because like this also within itself, futures is like somebody saying, I think wheat prices are going to go up by 5 cents, or because of this, that, and that. It's speculative, but it's real good speculation. So let's say there's a drought, then we're going to say, okay, well, shit, the prices are going to definitely go up because it's going to be less of it because of the drought. So it's an opportunity for people who see that, let's say, the stock market, okay, if you haven't been in since last year, or if you're not constantly researching and finding really, really good picks that give you really, really great growth potential, you may not know. So you may join some forums and ride the Robinhood train and make some money off something like GameStop, like what happened recently. But the truth is, if you got in late, you didn't make any money. That's the bottom line. If you got in when it was at $200, unless you sold it when it was at 400, you didn't make any money. So a lot of people are not getting into the stock market and even cryptocurrencies underneath the right intention. So if you're just fearing missing out, then you're going to actually lose money, because these things will come down, because at some point the interest in them is not going to be so high. It's not going to always be so high. If everybody's doing it at one time, then of course the price goes up. But if something happens and people start selling, the price goes down. So these are the things that you have to deal with in the stock market. These are the things that you have to deal with also in any kind of market. But looking into the futures and commodities and various other things like that gives you a better opportunity, because if this so-called world is going to evolve, let's say solar panels and this new green stuff that Joe Biden's talking about, like, these metals and these precious metals and the mining stocks and the companies that are mining them, it's going to be important. Like, no matter what, we're going to need grains. We're going to eat rice, grain, and wheat and barley and various other things. Like, that's not going anywhere. Forests for timber and wood, that's not going anywhere. Livestock, that's not going anywhere. It's just a matter of how do you invest in these things. And the futures market is slightly different, but pretty much the same thing. But me personally, my thing is that these are the modern instruments, the same modern instruments that are not much different from Wall Street, except for you're dealing with a more industrial side of it, the companies that are producing the things that the world essentially needs, and the economy or the economics of it is already set up for those needs to continue. So if they're going to be building solar panels, they need silver is a part of it. Food is going to be needed. Some places going to have a drought and they're going to come for more food from somewhere else. So that's the futures market. And if you got a real nice platform to use or to get into that, like, that is definitely amongst the modern tools that people really need to be considering. Me personally, I'm big on the prospect of livestock. I'm big on the prospect of what grains and food prices are going to be, because it's already increasing this year. It's already increases. From what I'm hearing, it's up 8% already. And this is just the first month of the year. The food prices are going to go up, and we're going to be, over here diddly do in a way, and not really realizing that the price is going up, but your income isn't. And that will cause a problem. So, like, even though these things, in my opinion, are solid for the market, for what the market is right now, for the world that we live in right now. If you had stocks and, and you felt like you wanted to pull out and go into something safer than going into futures and certain commodities and livestock, and, it's just figuring out how to do that. So, these days, the modern investor doesn't want to own everything, but we're looking at an economy that may require for you to own a few more things. And who knows what those things are going to be that you own are going to be worth, providing that things change. But, being back to basic economies, is where this road leads to. Because, when your wealth is controlled, your economics are too. And that means that the management of your home is being controlled by who controls the economics. And people, like I said, we're wrong if we think going to work every day is you being in control of your economics. As long as you're not producing, or you're not a part of that production scale. Because 150 years ago, if your family worked together on the farm, even the kids were working, they were part of the production scale as well too. But this is what is really going to take. And anything else that's too modern, that makes you feel like we don't have to do that, or we don't have to go there, it's just really fooling you. If you think that, like, we don't face the opportunity of going back in time and these basic economic things are more valued, like, shoot, we could be in a situation where you're paying for it in Bitcoin or crypto. The bottom line is that they're still needed. Basic economics is still needed. And, basic economics is very, very simple and complex to a certain degree to understand. Because if you look at this graph right here, right, this is the distribution of labor since 1840 to 2010. So that's a long, over 150 years of this. Look at the graphs, and look at the time. See, 1910, around that time, 1920 is when things really started to go in drastically different directions. you know when you that's the cross point, and that cross point just happens to be when the Federal Reserve came on board and started managing a lot of things, and their power started to grow. But since 1840, agriculture used to be 70%, 70% of the labor force. And then you can imagine that 70% of the hardest workers of that labor force were men, but it also include entire families. And that makes sense for it to include entire families. But look how far it has gone. So now 1910 and 12, around that time, boom, it comes down, crosses over with services. The service industry starts to grow and boom from there. It doesn't even look back. And that's what most of our economy has become. So now look what happened last year. The service economy took a major, major, major blow. Some of these places don't need you anymore. And some of these places, if they still need you, they need less people than before. Because now this whole economy has been rigged to grow the service industry. But then look at agriculture. Look what happened to agriculture. The thing that you possibly need the absolute most, which is food. Our priority on it went all the way from 70% to damn near 2, 3, 4%. And this, and everybody here listening eats every day. Now the industries change as well too, because there's industries were developing based on needs. But then the industries started to change and started to look how the growth of the industries went. They naturally grew. This is when the coal mine and steel mines and all of these things were growing. And then what happened? Peaked around the 1950s, around the 60s. And then guess what happened? From there, they started shipping all the damn jobs that they were creating to overseas. They started creating ingenious ways to employ less people. So service went up. So that means what? Pizza delivery persons, like, how important is that? Like, how important is it? People was like, it's important to serve people junk, right? Okay. I'm not saying that they don't serve a role. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying on the scale of economics, what are they creating? What are they producing? What are they providing? And that's why a lot of these, these jobs and the economy, as they're making this big fuss over it as they are, because They don't see the service jobs coming back. And it's not like they don't see it and it can't happen. It can very well happen. But these people who are trying to change our lives in the manner of which they are, it doesn't include that. You see, they influence where the jobs go. If you can influence a man to just take a paycheck instead of produce for himself, then what do you have? Like, what kind of economy is that going to be in the long run? And plain and simple, we stopped being creators and producers all across the board. We could blame it on the men, but we got to blame it on the whole entire family unit, because the family unit is supposed to exist to have a production role, a production capacity. You know, like we're so used to somebody bringing us everything, that the idea of having to go and get our, our own food from our own farm and growing in our own backyard. Like I have a balcony garden that's not that big. I picked tomatoes and some greens out of it today and ate them. Like you don't need something that looks like this, but the factor that you're trying to do is that you're trying to be a producer. Because if you produce something that's valuable, it's a tradable asset. That's how I view it. You got to be a producer. And if you're not a producer, then what happens to an economy when people stop producing? They start begging for this free money. Before you know it, I've seen those tweets where's my $1,400? Where's my $600? When people felt like it wasn't coming. And this is a part of the propaganda machine to actually subvert the common people out of their wealth. Wealth is in the labor. Just like I said about the land earlier, like what's the good of having 20 acres that you call yours? You don't do anything on it. You don't keep it clean. You don't harvest no hay from it. You don't put no animals on it. The soil is, you're not even getting any wood or timber from it. We look down on the man who does these things. We consider him primitive. But what do we produce from our families? Look at your family right now, all 4 of you, 5 of you, or how many siblings you got, including parents. What could you guys come together and produce that would be a valuable asset in an economy that is a bad economy? And then think about it. It's going to cost you a lot to produce that in a bad economy. So can you do it together? Yeah, we devalued this. Hard work is not the base of it anymore. Family is the original economic base and business concept. Like there was no other reason to have a business in those days, because like you were only going to get it from being around the same people who you consider your family. So in some cases, you had children considering that, hey, everybody's going to chip in and be a part of this machine. And this is what's going to make this machine go well. Unfortunately, we live in a world now where we got to do more. So therefore, your family business could be based on providing, something bigger and broader to a lot more people than just to yourself. So that's what has happened. But that's the concept there. Because within how these people who own a business and run a successful business deal with each other is going to determine how the nation deals with itself. And now if these people become crooks and start dealing with people bad, and then they're going to deal with us on every level, government, everywhere, you're going to get the short end of the stick. I saw this this guy in Africa somewhere, and he says, whenever you see a man in Africa walking his cows, he's walking the bank. In these places, they still understand the intrinsic value of what this cattle is. And that's why, it's called livestock. The stock within itself is just like the stocks that are traded. These are tradable assets. So these people, they have this understanding themselves. And a big part of this understanding that these people have is that they know that things might be changing, but this is still a hard, tangible asset. This cattle, this cow, this pig, this chicken, or whatever the case is, it's not changing. It's not just, for the meat of it. The skin is good and various other things. Like there's so many uses and value that make the cattle or the cow or whatever animal still valuable. And that's a part of being a producer. But what happened was that we were once doing these things for ourselves. And then corporations took over the management of most of our essential commodities. And the reason they did that is to say, hey, Listen, we don't need you raising your own pigs and animals and food. We don't need that. Like, we need you to work this job over here at IBM. We'll take care of that for you. We'll deliver your food to you. You know, this was the Amazon of the 1950s, when all this modern technological things came in, and microwaves and power this and power that. It was to comfort people while they are sedated at work. And work may seem like this hard job to do, because some men's jobs were hard, right? Like, if you worked on an oil field, if you worked on a mining field, a coal mine, like, that was hard. Sometimes you didn't come back alive. So even to risk all that, just for what? For these people to turn around 50 years later, 60 years later, and treat us like trash. And that's essentially what has happened. Whatever industry, basic industry that should be people managed, right? Like this, like animals and food, whatever they took over, they made this shit worse. They feed the cows shit that they don't even freaking eat if they were normal. The chickens too. And then you eat that and you wonder why, like, you feel the way you feel. But the point is, these are things that we did for ourselves. Now we're too modern now. We don't, nobody wants to do this. You know, and I've spoken about it on a live that I did about 6 months ago. You know, the average man doesn't know where to start with building wealth from hard, tangible assets like land. The average person is going to come and look at it and not see the value in it, because they've been taught to not see value in it. They don't see the stream as water for themselves and for their families, so that way they got to take care of it. They don't see the plot of land as, okay, I can make this and that kind of income, or if not income, at least I can have the sustainable things that I need on this piece of property. You know, I'm going to keep enough trees on there so that way it doesn't get over flooded. I'm going to cut enough trees just for some firewood and to build a couple houses. Like, we had everything, and we still do have everything that we need. It's just our mindsets have been turned against the practicality of where we came from. And we've been told that this modern concept of who we're supposed to be is who we are. And look at it. It hasn't been working. No part of it is working. We don't have any economics as a common people in America because our families cannot stay together. You know, they sold off my grandfather's property. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. Like, why weren't they smart enough to see what the man was doing with it before? Why? Because they didn't want to farm. It seemed primitive. Oh, that's that's not what people want to do anymore. You know, and it's quite frankly, it's the demise of man. It really is, because now I'd rather take a shortcut. And what the hell comes with the shortcut? Did y'all listen to my podcast on the website, Fight, Flee, or Bend the Knee? The shortcut usually involves bending the knee. And now we're stuck with this, because now if you gave somebody raw material, raw land, he's going to be like, I don't know what to do with this thing. I'm not going to get a return on it fast enough. These tomatoes and this, that, and I got to do everything for myself. Listen, man, this used to be how it was. That's why you needed the family, because everything that was required to take care of you was it was a team sport. And now you ain't got the team no more. You're isolated. Your family is not dependable, not for the basics. And if you're listening to this, you're probably the type of person who sees the need to work with the family, to, sees the value in it. But where you're coming from and where they're coming from and what they're accustomed to, they might be cooped up in the city. They don't want to leave. If they can't get that FEMA food or some junk food or some processed food, which is filled with poison, they're not going to eat real food. And the real food that they eat, is going to be doused with chemicals and this, that, and that. They're not checking the quality of it. This is where we're at in this world. We can't extract any wealth because we are so separated from the land. We're so separated from it that there's just no way that we even learn to understand it without preparing in advance. You got to prepare. You ain't just get out there. Let's say you're in Virginia or something. You're not just gonna be there and not know what happens in what season. If you were hunting, if the water was running, how much water to collect. We don't know these things. This is a part of masculinity that is gone to it for the most part. You know what I'm saying? The Midwest boys usually hit me up and tell me stories of Midwest Southern boys about how they can still do certain things that their grandfather did once. The mass majority can't. So, like the way I see it, guys, is that you can choose, you can choose what you want to choose at the end of the day. But we've seen this shit before. Don't get played. Don't get played economically, because we've already been set up for the major F bomb already. We've already been set up. We've already been set up to fail. Like, there's so many things that are against us economically, that most people, if you do have a little bit of money, like, you're literally on the freaking bridge of losing it all, depending on what happens next. And a little bit of money is what the hell is a little bit of money? Because you get what I'm saying? Because people right now with their money are better off owning assets and not having money than to have assets that you will eventually leverage off for money and then be left with nothing. And of course, I didn't even talk about policy. I didn't even talk about the different things that are going to be changing, that's included in all these stimulus bills, the passport IDs and the vaccinations and all the different things that are going to get slid underneath the table for us in regard, just specifically and specifically for being puppets. Like, okay, you want to bend the knee and you want to accept it. Like, that's why I went over all these other things, because in the podcast I said fight, flee, or bend the knee. And what that means is that fighting looks differently. Fighting looks differently depending on where you're going to be at. Fighting could be growing your own food. Fighting could be taking that stimulus and setting up a solar panel setup that can, so that way, if you see that you're not going to have a job, or things or your income is going to be reduced drastically from, let's say, $2,500 a month to something like 700, like, and your light bill was 300, like you've got to be able to learn how to fight. But bending the knee means that you're sitting around waiting for people to promise you or deliver you, or bring you somewhere where you're not going to be. And so that's why with whatever you do have, you want to make the best, decision in assets, like where you're going to invest your money. Because like I said, who knows, if things may go good, like, like stock market might blow up triple more, and whatever you got in your Acorns or Robinhood account turns from 500 to 50 grand. Like, it's possible, but not really. So, these are the same illusions that some people have when they're counting on somebody to save them. So it's best to make the best decision with the information that you have. Like, you got to get informed. And don't forget, guys, if you appreciate the information that we got going on here, go ahead and shoot me a Cash App or something, any donation or whatever you got. I appreciate that. Appreciate the love. So yeah, moving forward, I'm just saying, for most folks, don't get played. Don't get played. Like, the whole cards are getting set up right now. Like, you can be selfish about what you want. Maybe you need this kind of job. Maybe you just love living in the city because this is where you're from. Maybe, you don't want to leave because this, that, and that. Whatever the case may be, like, don't get played. You know what I'm saying? Don't get played. Don't allow these people to make you any promises and you didn't extend your own kind of opportunity for yourself. Like, you just sat there and wait for them to come and swab you. You know what I'm saying? You just be like, oh, okay, it's not going to be like that. Nah, it just might be like that. Haven't you seen what is going on? So anyways, guys, like, always looking to, to have more conversations about these different things. I've been getting a lot of people hitting me up about, investing and making various moves. And of course, I'm offering this 1 hour economic coaching session that I've been, basically just dropping jewels on people and saying that, hey, I'm not saying that, talking about allocating huge sums of money, because I believe that when you got huge sums of money, it's easy to operate, but it still doesn't mean that your investments are going to be solid. It doesn't mean that they're going to be applicable next year, because let's say a guy right now who says he's got extra money, he's been doing his life savings or whatever the case is, then boom, he buys all these properties that he thinks are great investments because he thinks there's going to be a future, in this area. So he's under the regular mindset. He's just waiting for things to turn around in his favor, right? So he buys these properties, he pays a little bit, he overpays for them, and he's thinking it's all good. And then all of a sudden, boom, interest rates go up, which he didn't expect. You know what I'm saying? And things change. The cost of them go up. Things change drastically, and now this investment that he's making, based on the way that the environment or the economy is going, it's not going to be worth what he thought it was worth anymore. And so, like, these are the different things that are happening, because if you just look at it from one perspective, then like, you just better be good in that one perspective that you're using. Like, I don't know anybody, if you got into crypto trading just recently in the last 3 months, you had to have taken some losses, unless you just got in before and held, because of the volatility of it. If you got in the last month, you've definitely taken some losses. You got to know why you want to use these things. You got to know why you want to invest in these things. The precious metals market is going to boom. Like, I can honestly say that if you had a bank that you wanted to leverage, and like I said, like, say if you had 5 or 10 grand and you wanted to, like, put it all, let's say divide it up 60, 50 or something, put 50% one place and spread it 50% in other places. Like, I would say that precious metals, you couldn't do without that, because if this Green New Deal goes through and solar panel expands, they need silver for that. So there are different reasons why you're doing it, but you just kind of have an idea of how you're going to possess it. So let's say, for example, are you going to be trading silver by investing in the silver companies or what have you, or are you going to be owning some? And then if you own it, what's your plan of liquidating it? So there's different ways to consider what economics could be based on what's going on right now, based on the amount of money that they're printing. Inflation is definitely happening. They're going to tell you that they're printing the money to prevent inflation, but it's definitely happened just like it did in the times where they over printed the money. You get what I'm saying? So, like, you kind of have to understand these different things, so that way you don't have a naive mentality of how to look at it. So, a lot of people are looking into lands in key states, and I think where you have it is key, especially if you're an entrepreneur. There are different places that you want to be in, states that you may not want to be in. And I think that energy sufficiency is one of the biggest things that we're going to have to deal with in a world where, if ish hits the fan and finances don't roll, or grids or get locked off because you posted something they didn't like on Facebook and they shut down the whole grid to your house or something like that. These are the things that people, I don't think that they're thinking about. And so, like, becoming energy sufficient, because energy is such a big deal. That's the one last thing. I think that for me personally, there's a lot of things that I can go backwards in the time clock and do, but without electricity or some form of energy, I think that's one of the last ones that I would want to do. I can go without a lot of things, but I don't see myself going out without some steady source of energy. I could, even though solar energy is not always the best, depending on where you live. So, another thing, other things involved is, like, what hard tangible assets that you have access to now that could rise in value. You may have some things in your home that that you don't know that could be valuable. Horticultural systems and strategies that can help you grow and produce your own food. I'm big on that. I used to help people assemble systems for food production a lot. I used to do it for marijuana growers too. How to make use of unused land. That's a big deal. I've got some land that has been sitting there for a long time that I really want to put into use and put it into producing something for me. Like, you know, it's not always about I'm going to take this chunk of money and do certain things. It's about really understanding what's there, and then, you know, returning the value of family or home economics versus the rising cost of living. Because like one of the biggest things, you know, that I've been doing in my family is just like literally, you know, we have trees, mango trees, and we have various other things. We turn certain fresh herbs into alcoholic tinctures that are going to be used as medicines. Store certain things properly. We dry fruits in certain seasons, dry vegetables. You know, we store beans, you know, the ones that I would eat, instead of having canned foods that are highly salty in any kind of emergency. Having dryers, you know, dehydrators to preserve food. These things are like these things are the things that's going to keep you from begging or stealing, if you know how to take necessary precautions at this particular moment. And many of these things can be done for so less, but you know, it's a way to look at economics and your economy, you know. And for a limited time with this, if you order today, I'm giving away also my more tea supplement. And this one, you know, you get it involved and it'll come out within a week, shipped out to you. This is one of the best ones out here for natural testosterone boosting. It has a positive hormonal balance effect on women as well. Muscle mass enhancing. Like if you really go to the gym, this is definitely something that's going to help you. And it's one of the only, matter of fact, the only plant-based source of vitamin D3. Like this is amazing stuff, filled with phytonutrients and definitely good for increasing sexual performance. So with this 1 hour economic session, we talk a little bit, you know, whatever it is, and we talk about these different things that are here and these options that we have. I understand that, you know, like the majority of us aren't rich. You know, like rich people are not thinking about what they're going to do next. In reality, they have information that's been given to them in enough time for them to make moves and position themselves. And that's generally the position that most of us like don't get. That's what we don't get. We don't get an opportunity for somebody to be like, you know, let's say for example with the GameStop thing, if anybody was paying attention to that, um, with the GameStop thing, I got tipped when it was $55. But I was just like, GameStop, like, why is GameStop going to be valuable? Like, I don't understand. I was questioning it. So, you know, in 3 days, this shit was like $200. And I was like, what's going on here? And then I started to see what's going on. So information, and when it comes to you, is key. If you know how to make the right decisions with the information that's coming to you. If you don't know how to make the right decision, or you don't have the means to make the right decision with the information that you have, then you know, hopefully you get that information again, you know. But like I said, most of us most of those who are already in an advantage position economically, they're not wondering what to do. It's some of us out here who are just waking up right now and and are seeing that, oh snap, like I just can't do nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't do anything. I just can't sit and do nothing. And that's really what it really boils down to. These economic coaching sessions, just really talking about different avenues that people can go in. You can definitely get some of this stuff online, but probably get it from somebody who's an entrepreneur who understands and is looking at the market for what the market is evolving into. Me personally, I chose to, you know, have an alternative health-based business, even though I knew that in a coming economy, they might outlaw my herbs, you know, make it hard for me to sell wellness products because they don't want people to get well. But I do understand that if I'm producing it, which is different than just retailing it, if I'm producing it, people are going to seek out medicines based on the need for it. They're not going to be, eventually the cost of it is not going to matter. And, you know, you can get those herbs and look at the herbs that I have available at the website, herbsofkings.com, if you want to just get more familiar with the stuff that I sell there. But the bottom line is, like, we have to pivot because the world is pivoting right now. And we're not saying that don't fight for what matters to you. You get what I'm saying? And basic economics is what really should matter to you, which means that you got to have a functional relationship with your family. And I know that that's not so easy to do, even in hard times. So it just shows you how far we have fallen, to the point where we are right now. So these 1 hour economic coaching sessions are $75. And like I said, it does include a month supply of my more tea supplement. So go ahead you can get this at heartonbreak.com under the work with me tab. If you want to look at the herbs that we also have available at herbsofkings.com. And, just a lot of different things, but like, I'm gonna be keeping this information going, and pumping, because a lot of people are asking and a lot of people are wondering, because, you come from somewhere where you didn't have this mindset. You see something different. Like, some of our family members are just literally just out here, just free floating and hoping anything happens. Like, oh, it's gonna be okay. Oh, I heard that they're gonna have a universal income, or I heard that they're gonna make everybody take the vaccine. If you like like this narrative that I heard, that this, it's like, it does nothing for you. It does nothing for you if you yourself are not in a position to produce. You get what I'm saying? Because then what you do, you become speculative, and a speculative person is just waiting for shit to happen. So therefore, they're not interested in making a decision. They're afraid. They're afraid. I've spoken to people in the last couple months or so about making certain investments. I get how they're afraid. Unless you got it to lose, I get how someone could be afraid. But are you just gonna sit there and do nothing? Are you gonna make a real ploy for your own independence? Are you gonna say to yourself, you know what? I'm a salesperson for this company, and the company went out of business, but I can I can use my voice to sell something else, and I could use what I get from that to supply the other things that I need. But if, like I said, if a man or a person doesn't have any really essential skills and value-based skills, like, that's crazy. Like, I don't like, somebody at first sight might just look at me and say, okay, you're just an author, a guy that writes books and thought leader and stuff like that. But shit, like, come to my house and these things happen, we gonna eat. We can grow some food, like, if we are prepared for this mentally, then there will be, because I know how to do it. And there's other things that I know how to do too. And so I always, like my father used to tell me when I was a kid, I need you to be able to learn how to do all of these things just in case I drop die tomorrow, so that somebody's got to do it. That's what he used to say. And so never saw the value of it, because I always thought I was going to be this and that educated. But now it makes so much sense. It makes sense that I can, put stuff together and build my own furniture and build my own home if need be, know how to mix and treat the soil properly, so I can grow my own food if that need be. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are the things that are going to matter. And it doesn't mean that if you don't have this hard, tangible, earth-based skill, that you can't survive. You can use whatever skill or talent that you have to survive, but it's just about being mindful of the fact that something that's worth something in one economy may not be worth it in the next. And so you have to be more economy bulletproof. And that's why I believe that, for me personally, I'd buy pigs, goats, animals if I have land. Yeah, that's what I do. I know people are going to continue eating that stuff. I know that, like, as much as I'm a vegan and I don't eat animals, I know that there are 3, 4, 5 billion people who do. And so, that's a tradable asset. Because let's say if I had 30 pigs or 20 pigs, and I knew that I can trade one of them for a certain value, regardless of what the currency is at that time. And that's where I'm trying to get guys to really think. Tradable assets, they're still going to be valuable. We still need certain things, so yeah, man, I appreciate you guys spending this time with me. And we can open it up if anybody has any questions or what have you. I didn't get the chance to put it on live, so we weren't joined by as many people today, but the show had to go on nonetheless, and it will be running again. But definitely appreciate you guys. And if you had any questions, you can hit in the chat or just let me know. But yeah, I think that, the world that we living in, thank you, you're welcome, um, is one where we really do have to become more economically conscious. You know, we've got to stop thinking like consumers, because what we've done is we've just exchanged consumer rights. We've changed our birthrights for consumer rights. Like, you like, people can literally go through your text messages and your emails, and and your data easily, track you, do all of these different things, and it's okay, just as long as you're making some money or you're getting $15 an hour or some shit like that. Like, it's time to reconsider your economics. Time to break it back down to the source of the family, and really work with that. Work with that. Appreciate you, Alfonso, man. So yeah, man. If that's it, man, we're gonna get up out of here. Appreciate you guys coming out today, and we're gonna keep on. We're gonna be doing more. This is my first class of this year. Sorry it took so long, but we're gonna get it cracking. No problem, Nick. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for always coming through.